are recording on Friday, October 31st. Happy Halloween, everybody. 11:22 a.m. Eastern Time. When I was in middle school, I always took great delight in writing for the date
Yeah.
because you weren't in school on Thanksgiving or Christmas or July
Uh,
4th or New Year's. So I'd always try to get away with like turning in my math homework and just write Halloween and then like the instead of the month and the day, I would just say Halloween, 2004. And I don't know why that's my memory of like Halloween. It's just I try to get away with that. But for everybody listening, watching, or it'll be up later. Mr. Brandon Weichert's been on here a trillion times before.
yep.
I think we first got together talking about Space Force and then
Yep.
Biohacked and then it was Stealth
Iran,
Wars?
the
Shadow
Iran
War.
Shadow
Shadow
War.
War. Stealth Wars, Brigadier General Spaulding. And that's all, I'm kind of proud of it. That's off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And and you guys can go to the description. You can find all of his writings. You can find all of his interviews, and most importantly, you can find his Twitter and his books. Please go grab one of his books. Go throw the man a couple shekels. I don't care if you read it. Just go give him money. Give him money. Just that. I rate every Audible author that I have on this show 5 out of 5 stars, no matter
Well,
how
thank
much I
you.
enjoyed the
Well,
book.
thank you.
I really do because I'm like, gave me time out of. I'll write a review too because I'm like, yeah, fuck off. Just go give the
Well,
man some
thank
money.
you.
Go give him some money.
Right now there's a coordinated hit that's been going on since May on my Ukraine book to drive the ratings down on Amazon. I aggravated the Indians when I was reporting on the Indo-Pakistani war, and then I always aggravate the Ukrainians. So the two of those groups, the two networks, have been trying to make my book plummet in the ratings.
Whatever,
So
man.
yeah,
Whatever. It's I've like to think that it all comes out in the wash or it's all part of kind of God's hand. And
yeah,
even some stuff, sometimes something happens and 2 days later you're like, oh wow, that worked out. Sometimes
yeah,
it's a lot longer. I mean, I was banned from YouTube in August 2021 and I got
yeah,
reinstated October 1st of this year. So 4 years, two
yeah,
months. You could be like, what's the benefit in that? Well, the benefit is I was forced to grow on Rumble and I built
yeah,
50,000 subscribers there.
yeah.
Now I'm back on YouTube and well, now I had just uploaded the remaining 1,300 episodes since I was banned. But
Good for
now
you.
I've built up like a network from Rumble that's just
Uh-huh.
migrating over to YouTube. And what's the importance of that? Rumble's great. Rumble's awesome. Rumble has 77 million 77 million monthly active users,
Yep.
MAUs. YouTube has 2.1 billion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so
That's great.
I like to think of it as almost like like Dirk Nowitzki used to train with a weighted vest all summer when
Uh,
he was doing jump shots. Then he would take it
uh,
off when the season starts. And he's like, and I could fly. I
yeah.
like to think that that's kind of how it feels on YouTube now. I've got a work ethic of like, no one's ever going to help me. I'm going to be banned and censored.
Yeah.
Make do with what you have. And now I'm back on YouTube, and I feel like I'm taking the vest off, but I have all that. So my point is
Endurance.
well, not only that, it might come out in the wash for you. I'm gonna shut. I've
Yeah.
been running my fucking mouth, obviously.
No, no, and
Shut
actually,
up.
it's funny. As a side note, and maybe this is too inside baseball, but now I have a show as well, and I want to get you on to talk about censorship and what you
Whatever you want.
experienced. Yeah, because I'm trying to do a show on the information war, and
Yeah.
obviously censorship is a big. People don't realize it, but I found out recently that for 5 years, and this continues under Elon. For 5 years, my at We the Brandon Twitter has been suppressed. And it's funny, I didn't even need to find that out because I could tell because whenever they change an algorithm, what'll happen is for like 48 hours, suddenly when they change it, I'll get like 2.1 million impressions, 1.5 million impressions on all my tweets, and then they'll announce they're changing it again, and then suddenly it goes back to like 200 impressions.
Mhm.
And it's like, obviously, they
Dude,
are,
I can tell since I've been back on when I got back on YouTube. I was like, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. They're gonna be I know for a fact that they've
yeah,
turned off the suppression because it used to be if I clicked on any video, it'd be like, where do it'd be
yeah,
90% external links, 10% or 8% sharing,
yeah,
2% recommended. Now it's like 95 people are getting recommended.
yeah.
You go, oh, wow. I really.
I don't understand why I'm being banned. I mean, I know back in the previous regime it was because of my COVID reporting, and I
Mhm.
know that that hurt you, when you were doing that. But for whatever reason, it's been almost as bad as it was under Jack Dorsey. It's been, and I'm sure when this gets out, I'm sure it'll hurt me even more because they
Yeah.
suppress when you complain about it. But there's no one to talk to over there. But anyway, so that is eventually what you and I should be talking about.
That
I have a
that
show
and
out.
that and real quick, just as your own personal note, I tell us that
Yeah.
anyone that starts a show, my entire Rolodex is yours.
Well, vice
So just
versa. In fact, today I'm going to
yeah,
be talking with a guy named Dan Collins, who's a friend of mine, who I'm going to try to get on your show too.
please do.
He has 25 years of experience running factories in China,
Okay.
and he's a really interesting
I'm gonna
guy.
make a note of that. Hell yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm talking to him at 2 o'clock today, so I'll
Awesome.
be sure to get, because he's always looking to do interviews, and his show is Chaos Incorporated on YouTube. And he's a really interesting guy. But anyway, and actually, this is a great segue because what I'm going to talk to you about today is the op-ed I wrote in the National Interest that Nicholas Kristof dutifully ripped off a day later or 2 days later in the New York Times. Plagiarism is the surest form of flattery, I guess. But yeah, basically, I've been following the trade war with China, and I don't know if we should be doing a victory lap on this. It definitely doesn't feel like a major victory for the United States. Feels like more of a win for China. So, that's where I'm kind of coming from.
Yeah, I saw something. Had just glanced at it, but I saw something yesterday. I think part of the Nvidia growth was that not only are it's rumored that the restrictions on exports are going to be loosened, but it might even go farther in that they're going to be allowed to export, I guess, whatever
Yeah.
there's some GPU, some, or
So
C.
the Trump doesn't want to touch is the Blackwell, which is their most advanced, but he already in August, just to get G to the table, he said he was going to start licensing the sale of the second and third most advanced high-end chips. So it's not the highest end, and I don't think he will let that go through the highest end. But the Chinese have a way of adapting, and so the argument is still even the second, third, and fourth highest will allow for them to make certain innovations and advances that they otherwise might not have made anytime soon. And that's part of why I think Xi even met with Trump, is because he knew this was going to happen, that Trump was going to let the licensing of those NVIDIA supplies go forward.
Wouldn't, I mean, I get, I understand that I don't understand and that I have a biology degree, and it's like, all right, simple
Well,
minded
you're
Tommy.
actually more qualified to talk about this kind of thing because it is sort of a hard science, and I think that guys who work in the hard sciences probably have a more natural understanding of it than somebody like me who's a social scientist by trade.
That's flattering, but I would, with whatever I'm about to say, is I would say it is, proves me wrong. My simple mind goes, yeah, ban all of it, Fortress
Yeah,
America. Another part of me goes, man, the best way to control them would
sure.
probably be to a degree. So you say, obviously, they're going to make advances. China's just, they're just going to Happy Meal it. They're just going to use a billion of them.
Yeah,
But there might be something said for, well, number one, maybe we've got way more advanced stuff now that no one
yep,
knows about. But the other is, you almost kind of, it's good that all of our allies buy our F-35s
yeah.
because if they're ever not our allies, we know
Yeah.
what those planes are, what they do. We know for a fact they
Well,
can't build them, and we know their weak points, and we probably got an off switch.
we've got an off switch too.
So
Yeah.
you would almost maybe want that.
Yeah.
And I know
No, I
that
get
this,
it. I get it.
yeah,
Yeah. And you're right. And you're right. And that's, I
you
think,
can't stop it entirely. You might as well
yes,
guide it.
you turn into it, right? Instead of trying to avoid the iceberg, just go through it. Yeah. And deal with the damage.
Regulate weed
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of
No, and I think
pretending
that's
it's
the
not going to get
argument.
in.
Yeah, and that's the argument they're making. Not Trump himself, because Trump doesn't really get into all this. It's sort of like winning or not winning. That's all he really, that's the worldview, is everything's great or everything's terrible. And if it's terrible, it's not his fault. So
Yeah.
that's the
And it's the
worldview.
worst ever.
That's right.
Nothing's ever been worse.
It's a disaster,
No
and
one's ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, and so that is the argument a lot of these people are making, and they're probably on. I hope to some level they're right, but and certainly I did have an exclusive scoop, and I put it on Twitter, and this is one of the ones that got like 2 million, and the Asia Times covered it, and all these different tech publications covered it. But I was told by somebody who worked. I don't want to say where because they're going to get in trouble. So it was basically somebody who would know. But basically, ASML, which produces the lithography machines that make the high-end chips, at some point in the last few years, the ASML, which is a European company, they got a call from China saying, "Hey, can you send some techs out to repair one of our down DUV lithography machines, which is an advanced machine, but it's not the most advanced machine because the most advanced chip production machines are not allowed to be licensed in China because of the tech bans." And so the European company sent technicians out to see what was going on. And when they got there, they immediately could tell, looking at the machine, there was nothing wrong with it. It didn't break on its own. Somebody had disassembled it and attempted to put it back together blind because they were trying to learn it. They were trying to figure out how to reverse engineer this DUV machine. So now I don't know if that voided the warranty or not. One would think it would. I don't know if ASML did, because this was from a secondhand source. I don't know if ASML did actually repair the damage, but the fact of the matter is the Chinese, this is what they do. They try to reverse engineer our high tech stuff that they get through legitimate trade deals. And then when things go wrong, they'll call the Westerners for help. And what somebody told me who works in China in tech, what they told me in a direct messaging I had with them, they said, a lot of times the Chinese will purposely break a machine they want to know more about. They'll call the Western help desk, have the technicians come out, and then stand over their shoulders and basically take copious notes on what they're doing so that they can learn it on their own and indigenize the production. So on some level, and we know they can't yet produce the really high-end chips, which is why they need NVIDIA. So on some level, you might be right, and Trump might end up being right for saying, hey, they're dependent on us. That gives us a degree of leverage. But as we've seen with everything else that we've given China, at some point, they do figure out how to indigenize and innovate on their own after imitating for so long. And so my fear is that over time, we'll lose even that leverage because eventually I think the Chinese will figure out how to make high-end chips the same way NVIDIA does. And so this is why I'm worried because the whole thing, and I said this in the essay, there were two strategies at play, one for China, one for America. Now, the American strategy was harder to achieve. The American strategy was always, from Trump's perspective, we're going to impose tariffs. Yeah, we're going to try to leverage that to get better deals. But more importantly, we're going to use tariffs to force American and Western firms to diversify out of China so that they're not exposed to those supply chains. And so that they can't strangle us the way that they used to do that. They use those supply chains into the West to kind of hold that over us. And the tariffs were supposed to be sort of forcing that to happen. It didn't happen though, and Wall Street fought Trump every step of the way. American soybean farmers, which are a core basis of his support politically at home, started getting slammed really hard. More than 50% of all American soybeans are sold in China, and China basically cut them off back in May. You had record number of small and medium farms foreclosing as a result. And I think that the Chinese played this better because the Chinese knew, hey, all we have to do is put enough hurt on the Americans and get them to the table because we need trade to continue. And they got it. And this agreement so far, it sounds like they're going to purchase 25 million metric tons of American soybeans. Well, that's basically what they were purchasing before. So it's just a resumption. They're going to gain access to not the highest level, but they will gain access to more advanced chips for their computers. And they did say they will cut down. It was almost this weird. It's like this quiet, implicit acknowledgement. But the Beijing said they will cut down on the production of the precursor element for fentanyl, which we have for years said China is, at fault for, which is killing tens of thousands of Americans every month in some cases. Um, in exchange for us dropping the tariffs, we had a 10% tariff on them for the precursor production. And so, in a way, Beijing admitted that yeah, they're the responsible party for producing this poison that's killing Americans. But how are we going to enforce this? There's no enforcement mechanism other than we'll just slap on more tariffs. Um, so, in my view, in the near term, and Ed Dowd, who I like a lot, says that I'm way off because in the long term it's going to, maybe, but as I say, in the long term, we'll all be dead. So like, at some point, I do worry about the short and medium term. And the reason, I'll stop talking after this, but the reason that we even had to do this deal, because Trump, I don't think was intending to have to sit down this way, was because China played their silver bullet. They put their ace in the sleeve on the table, which was rare earth minerals. They cut us off, and now we had to play nice because we don't have an alternative to their dominance over this very key, particular heavy rare earth minerals, which goes into the production of laptops and cruise missiles. The F-35. I think the F-35 uses like 99 tons of rare earth minerals. It's like some crazy amount. And so that's our primary plane. And the Chinese have the ability to completely just say, nope, you don't get any. So
which
anyway,
makes Ukraine make sense.
which in part does, it does absolutely. But again, we really, we really picked the wrong battle there.
No, no,
Uh,
no, no.
you
I
know,
mean, I'm just as a broad stroke. It's like, well, there is,
well, it makes Venezuela make sense too. And
yeah.
Green. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess I remember um I remember in college for, what, physics or biochem. It's, because they take your calculator and but like one tip they always gave is like if you're, trying to find an answer and you're crunched on time, a quick way is to just choose one of the if you know it's going to be positive or you know it's going to be negative,
Mm,
that choose one of the variables and then just add like nine zeros and then ask
okay.
yourself, does that make sense? It's a real quick way to go. Is this the right way to go? You know,
Yeah.
when you're on Google Earth and you can't get for your fuck where am I? So you just zoom out really quick, then you go,
Yeah.
oh, there, okay. You shift the map to how you know it and you
Yeah.
go back in.
Yeah.
That's a quick way to kind of guide you.
Yeah.
I guess that's how I like look at China. It's like, okay, real quick, are we going to hit them with a gigaton of warheads and vaporize them? No.
Right.
Okay. Are we going to do an invasion? No.
Hmm.
Okay. Come down real quick then. What are we going to do? They're
Right.
going to get these chips at some point. It's probably better to control their access to them,
Hmm.
and it's probably better to make them dependent on you and not, create a black market around it. And that way you know exactly what they're doing, what they're capable of,
Yeah.
and you can sort of guide it. And that's
Yeah.
it's like, well, so we're giving our enemy, it's like, unless you're going to vaporize them,
Right.
you have to find a way where it's the middle ground. And you can go, well, what if we didn't give them any? You can do that. And like you said, China always does reverse engineer. Are we gonna vaporize them? No. Well, then they're gonna get their hands on it somehow.
Yeah.
So try to, how do you, and like this stuff is, with geopolitics, there's no control variable. You can't go, that one
Right.
didn't work. Let's rewind again to 2005.
That's right. That's right.
Fuck it, do it live.
That's
So
right.
you got to go in now and
Yeah.
you might look at it and go, and then Colonel Mike Bennett, who writes an awesome series of books about Black Ops and shit.
Uh-huh.
I always remember he had one about the, leaving all the MRAPs in Afghanistan and how
Yeah.
they probably went to China and
Yeah.
he was writing about how, we had replaced some of the computer chips in them with identical copies, but we had a new form of like hyper small scale lithography or something.
Yes.
And so we had actually overwritten almost like a fluorescent marker when people mark cards.
Yeah.
We had put like our own control mechanism. Now, granted, it's all fiction, and then we
Yeah.
let it run, and because that
Yeah.
yielded more. Now, are we doing that? No, but I would imagine to a degree you do in the Cold War. We know that
Yeah.
Russia was getting
Yeah.
American defense stuff through
That
Canada
whole series, The Americans, is partly based on that story.
instead of
Yeah.
squashing it, we let it
Yeah.
go and we would just
Yes.
blow up an oil refinery every once in a while or
Yeah, that's
derail a
right. Well,
train.
and actually, it's funny. So this is, I think I can talk about it now, but a good friend of mine who served in the army, he was in special forces, and we went to college together. He told me back in when he was in Iraq in '05, he said that, we would use a drone and we would bomb a suspected terrorist stronghold, and then his unit would go in, and he said they would place you. This was back in the day of USBs. They would place, fake looking. They were real USBs, but they had fake damage on them. It looked like they were in the attack. He said they'd put them in with the debris, knowing that the Iranian intelligence services would come to the night after to try to see if they could pick up anything. And he said, and it was full of false information. And he said at one point the Iranians figured out they were doing it, and they started doing it to us because they knew when we found electronic information like that, we would connect it mobile and it would go straight up into our satellite system. And he said, so they started doing it back to us. And he said the Iranians figured it out that they were basically poison pilling. So then the Iranians started doing it to them.
We used
And this is back in '05. So, I can imagine it's more
well,
complex now.
Ben Rich, Skunkworks, he talks about
Yeah.
how they
Yeah.
used to drop U2 pamphlets and they'd leave them out in the sun, crease them, run over and put coffee stains and even kind of
Yep.
smear some of it, and then they would just drop it all over like East
Yep.
Asia,
Yep.
knowing damn, and it was all everything about it was wrong. Radar cross section,
Yep.
thrust, its
Yeah.
capability, ceiling. It was I mean, so why wouldn't it continue?
That's right. It
Why wouldn't it?
continues and it's more complex now. But of course, the problem is, um, I don't know, because it's funny because one of the reasons Trump did his Middle East business deal in what was it, March or April of this year, when he gave that great speech in Riyadh and he said commerce over conflict is basically the way we're going to do things now, and he did all these deals with Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain and Qatar. People don't realize the primary entry point was not energy, it was AI and computer technology development, because the Silicon Wadi, in places like Saudi Arabia, but also the UAE and even Qatar, they're really pioneering AI and other related technology research and development. And China has been in that market for years. And the concern was always, and in fact, there's evidence of this, that when Biden put in those high-end tech bans, the on the Chinese just shifted and started getting it from third parties in the Middle East, and that's been going on. So even if we were poison pilling chips that we were knowing were bound for China, the concern is they can still get it from third and fourth parties that might not be poison pilled, and then they can reverse engineer. The point that I'm making here is we've had 50 years of, or more now, of China on this ascendancy, not just economically, but in high tech. And my fear is that it's now come down to one or two industries that we still have dominance over them on. I don't feel comfortable saying that we are going to maintain that dominance in the long term if the trends persist, because China has this uncanny ability to adapt. I mean, even the Russians are adapting to our sanctions, for instance, quite well. So, that's my only concern here.
Well, it could be that this is just the cat and mouse.
It is.
And it's again, it's all out war, or you do, and it's not comfortable. It's not, 1950s supremacy, but
No.
it might be that this is kind of a way you do it. And
Yeah.
and again, there's no control group, there's no do-overs, so it's you're kind of while you're going, I think it's this way, and
Yeah.
you're just, you're going that way, and you hope you have enough gas to get there. I probably think that's what it is, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, to think that like Nvidia is not in bed with our own intelligence agencies is
Yeah.
any of the big tech companies
All these
and
firms.
all the big
Yeah.
finance. That's not even
Yeah.
a
Finance, tech,
that's not
even
even like shade on Nvidia.
oil,
That's just
even
one is
medical. Even I know for a fact one medical firm in particular, I have a family member that worked for them. He was very high up in the C-suite there, but after 9/11, they came to them because they had factories in the Middle East, and the CIA said, we want to use your company to basically provide covers for our non-official
Yeah,
And then as the patriotic thing, they're like, absolutely. And the guy who ran the company was actually a former CIA guy
yeah.
himself. And they were like, absolutely, we'll whatever you need. Yeah,
That's just that's a tale as old as the American Empire is like
that's right.
it's what we do. And so
That's right.
you got to imagine that. I mean, it could just be us rationalizing it, but you got to imagine there's a method to it. You got to imagine that
Yeah,
there's, it might not, maybe
generally,
it's just
yeah.
blunder. But
I do think a lot of it is I think a lot of it is blind luck, to be
yeah,
honest with
yeah. I
you.
mean, but that it's, you
Yeah,
know, to think that there isn't something going on
yeah,
there, or you know, I mean, if you let them buy your chips, does that not, that,
yeah.
that does that not kind of, that might slow them down from, you know, their
It
own
very well
novel
might.
exploration?
No, it very and actually, it's funny you say that
Let's
because
keep
there
giving them
is.
oil so they never even think about fission.
Yeah.
Like, you
Well,
know?
it's funny because actually, I deal a lot with the space policy people, and there is an argument in the space policy community that it was America's greatest mistake was not letting China be part of the International Space Station. So that because now what they've done is they've created an alternative that's even more
And
advanced,
with fusion
and
reactors.
they're well, yeah, and they're going to be excluding America from their space station at a time when the ISS is going to be decommissioned in the next probably 4 years, and we're not going to have a system in orbit, and the Chinese will. So in a way, yes, that's a fair point, but you know, there are things we could have done that were very onerous to not make them as dependent on us, which things like reshoring and onshoring and friendshoring, things like, rare earth mineral this is the big Achilles heel for us. And this is what the Chinese exploited brilliantly. They exploited it brilliantly. They knew if they played that card, it would force us to the table, and it did. But the thing we could have been doing is not just looking for rare earth minerals here, but we know for a fact, just 3 days, rocket ship away, the moon is full of all the rare earth minerals we could ever want. And I found this because this is another op-ed I wrote in the last month. The Obama administration, of all people, did a review. NASA did a review of how much it would cost to get a mining operation started up on the moon lunar surface, and they found it would cost about $30 billion in 2009 dollars. Costs about $30 billion to start it, which when you look at the amount of money we've blown, on other things, that just seems like a very small figure that could have over the long run a very serious amount of return. We wouldn't have to be reliant on China at all. They've captured something like 70% of the world's rare earth known mineral deposits, and they have, I think, like 92 or 95% of all the processing power for rare earth minerals. It's not just about getting it out of the ground, you have to be able to refine it. And the Chinese, they really lead the world. So even if they didn't have those rare earth mineral deposits that they owned, they have the processing ability. They have it in ways that nobody else does. But if we could start looking elsewhere, not just on Earth, and there are companies in Silicon Valley. There's a one out. I just communicated with this guy. His company is an asteroid mining company, and he's getting a lot of startup money in the last 2 years to build this thing out. And he sent a note to me about my essay, and he was like, "Why only the moon? Let's look at asteroids." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." I said, "But here's the thing: the moon is the closest. Like we can get there. We've been there supposedly. We could, we can get there, and it's relatively close. Where if something really goes wrong, we could probably do a rescue mission to help people if they get whatever up there." And it's a great training ground. And I noticed that SpaceX has now this week shifted from only focusing on Mars to now they're gonna do a lunar first expedition in the coming couple of years to test Starship and to basically preserve their stake in NASA, because of course NASA under Trump is threatening to cut off SpaceX for all these delays. So it's sort of a proof of concept that Elon wants to do, going to the moon first. So, there are alternatives, but that means it's not the easiest way. And my concern is that the United States tends to take the easiest, least path of resistance, which, yes, that helps us from time to time and it's gotten us this far. But now we're in a very complex and dynamic environment where we should be looking not just to 5 and 10 years, but longer term, can we not be reliant on the Chinese for what we're relying them on? And I think the answer is yes, particularly in rare earth minerals. It would just require an investment and a commitment politically to develop it. And we haven't done that yet.
It'd be like Russia should have been like a lot cheaper with access to Soyuz because
Yeah,
it'd be the inverse. It's like now look at SpaceX has done.
right,
You could say that
right.
would maybe. Now I know Elon is kind of self-motivated, but let's be honest. The fact that we didn't have any, there was a
That's
huge
right.
impetus there to make it, self-lit,
Yeah,
which has
you're
been a
right.
breakthrough in reducing, by like an order of magnitude,
Right.
kilogram to
In the
order.
long term, it ended up being much better. It was more expensive up front, less expensive now. Yeah,
So let's inverse it. Our
yeah,
Soyuz, our access are these GPUs,
yeah,
and we don't want China making self-landing rockets. How do we maybe make them, the necessities that, the mother of invention? Let's maybe not make it necessary.
yeah.
Let's if you're Putin and you have a time machine, you go, let them use Soyuz for $1 a
Right,
launch. Let them use it for a
right.
dollar a launch. Like,
That's right.
and that might be what they're doing now is like, yeah, let them do this because we don't want them because maybe we're doing some breakthrough and we're like, oh, they might be on the edge of this and they don't even
Yeah,
know they're about to stumble on this gold mine. All right, we'll
yeah.
give you the GPUs. And then another, I was thinking
That's
about
the
this
hope.
is, yeah, it's the
That's the
hope.
hope
And
because otherwise the alternative is it's going to get really hairy out there very
yeah,
soon,
yeah.
you know.
Um,
When it still might get hairy because if we do have some breakthrough technology, I'm not convinced we're going to want to even reveal it, even if things really, really get bad, you know.
our real ace in the whole stuff is only coming out when there are warheads in orbit.
Yeah, I think that's probably
That's the
true.
only time you're ever gonna see that
Well,
fucking that
if you
Area
look at it,
51, that
that's right.
1947, that
Well, not just Area 51, it's Edwards Air Force Base, which
Edward.
is
That's
where
the
they
only
have
time you're
skunk
ever gonna
works.
see
Yeah.
that real paperclip
I mean,
knowledge.
I briefed out at Edwards many a time. That's my favorite base to go to, meeting the Skunk Works guys. But I can't tell you how many times I've briefed them, and one of those engineers has come up to me and he looked at me and he's like,
Shit
man,
eating grin.
yeah, he's got that grin, and he's like, man, he goes, you don't know what we're playing with out in the desert. And I'm like, you want to tell me? He's like, no, I do not. And
No,
I
I do
was like,
not because
okay,
I don't want to die. I don't want my kids to
that's
die, and I don't want my friends to die. And because that's what
yeah,
will. That's the only
yeah,
time you're ever gonna see that fucking
yeah,
0 point anti-gravitic
yeah,
Mach 1400 stuff is
yeah.
when the warheads are in the air.
That's probably true, and I hope that's the case because it. Well, I think I've said this to you before, but and I've said this to our friend Ashton Forbes before. You know, I remember distinctly when the UAP craze was really getting high in like 2022, 2021. There were all these sightings over the Chinese man-made islands in the South China Sea, and the head of China's Air Force went to the South China Morning Post, the SCMP, and he said, you know, we know what these UAPs are. They're advanced American military gear and they're buzzing us, and we are not even fazed by it anymore because we already know where they're coming from. This isn't little green men, this is Uncle Sam. And it's just like, you hope that's the case. I really do, because that would be certainly reassuring on multiple levels that we've got access to that.
I mean that's this is my guilty pleasures, all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Let's say it is. Let's say it is real. Let's say, and I think it very well might be. Now factor that into this.
Yeah.
We might be carrying an extremely big stick.
We might be.
And it's like, hey, we are leveraging power. It's not GPUs. It's
Yeah.
we're folding space time.
Yeah.
It might be something like that, which I know it sounds absurd, but
That's the hope.
if you did have that superiority, you might be willing to be like, yeah, give them some GPUs.
But then again, it's like, then if that's the case, why are we blowing through all of this money that we don't really have to build weapons that are I mean, like the aircraft carrier, yeah, it's a cool piece of technology, but it's completely useless to the modern battlefield now. We don't, it's
I mean,
hypersonic and,
but
you know,
hasn't the Pentagon been audited and it's missing like seven
oh
trillion?
yeah,
Okay, well, let's be
trillions of
very like
dollars.
where
Yeah,
is it's not a billion. Like where is
yeah,
that?
yeah.
That's
Well,
somewhere,
remember
and
the day,
it's never
the
been
day
found.
before, the day before
Yeah, yeah,
9/11,
around 2.3
Rumsfeld.
trillion, and
Yeah,
that's back when it was only 2.3.
uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
we kind of all gloss over that it's never been found. But you have to think
yeah,
about that. Where is that?
right.
And it might be, are we blowing all this money? Maybe
Yeah, like Star Destroyers or
we
something.
might
Like,
have something
yeah,
that is like, yeah, we're not actually
yeah,
the real DoD
yeah,
budget, including the last 20 years of missing
yeah,
funds. If you walk it out, it probably comes out annually to like, it's actually been the DoD's budget's been 3 trillion since
yeah,
2000. And you're like, what?
yeah,
And it's like, it looks like we're blowing all this money on
yeah.
conventional, but there is some Gucci stuff. Like, I don't know. And, I
I
know,
don't know either at the end of the day. I mean, I only know what has been inferred when I speak at these bases, and you always have to wonder though, are they saying this because they know I'm gonna report it
well, that's
eventually?
why I always think
Is
is
this
like,
part of the
is it
disinformation?
well, it's the Ben Rich and the Skunk Works
Then
panel. They
yeah,
always go to
yeah,
the, and I honestly I think that book itself
yeah,
was a no, I'm not kidding because in it he talks about the D-21, the little
mm,
thing that came off the SR-71.
yeah, yeah,
He mentioned several times, and there are a lot of facts and figures known about it, but he mentioned several times some numbers that you cannot find anywhere else online. And it implies that the D-21 was getting up to like Mach 6 or 7.
mhm,
And then he goes on throughout the book to talk about how hypersonics are impossible. And then he mentions how in the 80s, the Pentagon asked them to make a Mach 14 fighter jet. And he
mm,
goes on and on about how it's not possible. And then he drops this thing about the D-21 from 30 years prior
right,
that was going. And then you start to go, is this book partially horseshit? Why
right.
wouldn't it? Who's Ben Richards? He's some random. No, he was the head of Skunkworks.
Skunkworks, right, right. Yeah. I mean,
It,
I
it,
do think a lot of these military or former military and intelligence whistleblowers talking about, oh, we've got access to this incredible. I think a lot of that is just a disinformation op. I think
and it's a good one to do.
it is because I think, ultimately, if our enemies, notably enemy like China, have caught up to us technologically or are about to, and we can't outpace them anymore because our industrial base is not looking so good, we're going to have to resort to these kind of psych outs. And this is what scares me because it's like eventually the enemy will call your bluff. Like eventually they're going to be like, yo, like, and kind of you're seeing this is why I start to think there's not anything in the desert because it's like you're already seeing Xi Jinping. I mean, in those trade talks, it was very clear. Trump was very exuberant. He was very excited to be there. Xi was very distant. Xi was very cold. And I know culturally there are differences. And, like the people are fixating on the fact that Xi didn't look up at Trump when Trump was speaking and look at him in the eye. And of course, in Chinese culture, that's actually considered disrespectful. That's why when Trump was talking, he was looking away because it's a form of respect in the Chinese culture. But when you look at even their nonverbal body language, and you compare it to say when Xi meets with Putin. Xi is very affable with Putin. They have a very natural ease with each other, even though they don't speak each other's language. But with Trump, he was very like standoffish, and he had some nice things to say and all this. But it was very clear to me. And then he left after an hour and 40 minutes. It was supposed to be a 4 hour meeting, hour and 40. He was out. He didn't even really say goodbye. He just kind of got in the car. Trump was still trying to be affable. Xi didn't want it. And some people on the American side said, hey, that's because we took him for a ride. I don't know. And then I see today, October 31st, Halloween, spooky. I see today China has officially announced they are going ahead with the BRICS currency to be an alternative to the US dollar. So then you start to see that and you go, oh, maybe there is something to the fact that the tables have turned. And we are living in, I mean, I'm very concerned we are entering a Chinese century. I see no evidence to suggest so far that China is going to collapse. Maybe it does, but I don't see the evidence suggesting that. I see a China that's very confident. Yes, they're going through an economic downturn, but we all are. I mean, the economy in America is horrible right now. So I don't know if that's a good judge of whether that regime will last. So this is what keeps me up at night is the stuff with the trade because that is the real battlefield is the trading and technology and the race for supremacy there. The shooting war is going to be the final kind of end of that conflict. It's not going to be the shooting war that's really important. It's the geoeconomic and the geotech.
I don't think China's going to collapse, but I
I don't
also
either.
don't think we're going to collapse because empires kind of have two ways. You either overextend and kind of fizzle out slowly and dissolve. It's, as the comedian Tim Dillon says, Great Britain's still called great. It never
Right.
imploded, but
Right.
it's just not what it's not
Right.
like free speech and the Muslim shit. But I mean, all things considered, everywhere in the world, including all the
Right.
third world, it's not you would rather go be in London than Sierra Leone
Yeah.
in terms of just
Yeah.
like plumbing. So
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it's going to collapse. Empires do that. They collapse, they slowly fizzle out, or, and I'm very shaky on this and I need to read up more on it, or you have something like Rome, where it goes to the verge of collapse,
Yeah.
turns into an empire, and then you
Right.
have
Well,
the
we're already
type,
an empire.
well, yeah, 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 yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, we might be
Yeah.
going more into if it can happen, it will happen now because of how close we've gotten to it, and it might
Yeah.
be that we bounce back. My point I don't think we're done yet either. For
No, I don't
the last
either.
couple of years, I thought we were. What are you saying about the buzzing in the UAPs? You might want to psych them out and have them really double and second guessing. Do they have something
Uh-huh.
that goes like Mach
Yeah.
1500?
Yeah.
Um, we might have there's another option where it's not a psyop, but it's also not that we have a fleet, and you can
Yeah.
simply go back to um, not World War II, but between World War II and the start of Korea is when Truman was told that they had precisely, I think, 13 nukes, but the Russians
Yeah.
thought we had something like
Like 100.
100,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I guess Truman went pale, but it was like they don't know that we only have. They know we have at
Right.
least two. We did it in
Yeah.
Japan. They know we've
Yeah.
got a couple more. All you need to do is like drop one and they go, okay, it's not horseshit. Like they do have some. How many do they have? And is that a gamble you want to
Right.
take? So we
Right.
might actually have, I don't know, a couple proof of
Yes.
concept things
That's what I think if we
that we
have,
go
that's what it would be.
zip this bitch over Shanghai
Right.
at Mach 3000.
Yeah.
Let them know that it's not just a radar phantom. Let them know
Yeah.
it's now they don't know. Do we have 1,000 of those?
Right.
Is that a gamble you want to take?
Right. 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 And but at the same time, I just assume if any information is stored on any server anywhere, the Chinese have probably already gotten a hold of it,
I
and they
don't. I
probably
think
already
stuff
know.
like that. I think that Area
Maybe.
51 stuff, man. I don't think it is. I think they
I
probably
hope
still
not.
do. I think they probably still. I've thought about this so many times. I think it's probably still blueprints. I think
I
it's
hope
probably
so.
blueprints
I hope so.
in
Because
an old Cold War bunker a mile
yeah,
underground with a nonstop Delta
yeah.
security team.
I hope that's the case because I can tell you as far back as 2005, the Chinese, they were air-gapped servers, we were told, but the Chinese managed to hack in to the servers that were holding all of the schematics for the F-35. And
Mhm.
this is back in '05, so it's still relatively not even a mainstream plane yet. And the Chinese were able to scoop everything up. It was called Titan Rain. They somehow managed to breach the computers, even though it was air gapped. There was no connectivity to the internet. There was an intranet, I believe, connection, but no internet. And the Chinese were still able to penetrate and get whatever they needed. So this is why I start to think, well, maybe they know what we have already. And they're just sort of maneuver. I had a Russian friend tell me that the Russians view America right now as a toddler with a nuclear hand grenade in its hand, and the Russians and by extension the Chinese, I assume, think that all they have to do is basically corral us without dropping that grenade into the corner, isolate us, and then go about their business because they don't believe anymore that we have the capability to run these grand strategic, visions like we used to. And to some extent, I think they might be right. I mean, I've dealt enough with people in DC. There are no real grand strategists there, not like George Kennan. We used to have people like this, but that's been decades since they were all a bunch of middle managers in DC. So, you know, I really hope that there is some ace in the hole because otherwise we're headed toward a very, very dangerous impasse where American power is really not what it used to be. But you did mention something, um, which is, what happened to Britain. Britain, the empire collapsed, but it was sort of the British just let it go because, first of all, they were getting pressure from us, but they couldn't afford it anymore. So they kind of they became just a country, a regular country. Something is happening here where the United States, there is a document I know sitting on Hegseth's desk right now, the new national security strategy memo. He hasn't implemented it because it's so controversial, but basically it calls for the repositioning and reprioritization of U.S. military away from Eurasia and the Middle East and into the Western Hemisphere and into Golden Dome. So basically, homeland defense plus our own hemisphere and forget about everything else. That is a form of sort of the empire letting go of a lot of its commitments, which I'm all for, and focusing on our hemisphere and our sphere of influence because that's the world we're leading into right now is a world of spheres of influence. And right now, our sphere of influence is penetrated heavily by the enemy. And so the thing with Venezuela, this talk about taking Greenland, this talk about Alberta becoming the 51st state, this is all part of not only the rare earth mineral race and the natural gas and oil race, but it's also part of I think, the recognition, at least in some quarters in Washington, certainly the Trump administration, that we can't keep doing what we've been doing because we're overextended and we're going to need to reposition. Otherwise, everything's going to collapse. And I think that's actually probably the best thing we could do is to reposition away from the rest of the world right now and rebuild and rehabilitate and reassert in our own hemisphere.
I think that's what we probably are doing.
Yeah.
I do think we have an ace in the hole. I think it really is not to like fixate on it. I really do think you would just put it on physical paper.
Yeah.
I think that's the I think
I hope
that's
that's the case. I really do.
um
Because, you know,
and then I was gonna say there always are crazy. There was actually I just had on the head of the F-35 program 2 days ago.
really?
Tom Burbage. I've had him on twice. He
Yeah.
headed up the F-35 program and the F-22 program.
Very cool.
I didn't know that the first time I talked to him. I thought he had just written a book on it. And we started talking. He's like, so I headed up, and I was like, I didn't even know he worked on it, let alone
That's
he was the.
great.
I was like, oh shit.
I'm gonna
Um,
have to listen to that.
yeah. But in terms of, and I know I gotta let you run in a little bit, but like some of the most insane, like they do Zarbomba, 57 megatons, supposed
Yeah.
to be 100, and then we have this big thing. We even published something in like the 60s about how it's actually more efficient to drop 5, 10 megatons than
Yeah.
It's just so funny, just how like the Overton window shift. We'd be like, hey, guys, don't worry, we can still vaporize these fuckers, and but it wasn't declassified. I don't think until the last like 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
actually we did develop a 100 megaton, and that was
Yeah.
called I forget what it was, and then a 100 plus megaton, and it was called a flashback.
Flashback. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's pictures for like 60
Hmm.
years. No one knew
Yeah.
that. So, and then another thing we did, and it's in the book. There's two books on DARPA, or three. DARPA by Annie Jacobson. There's two more: The
Yeah.
Imagineers of War, and then I think Mad Scientists. I forget which one it is, but there was this thing in the 50s or 60s where we actually drew up and made the schematics for. I'm not making this up. We were going to excavate massive caverns under the Great Lakes, equal in
Mm.
size to the volume of fluid of all of them. We were going to put massive, like sluice gates at the bottom of them.
Uh-huh.
It and the water flow is to be so high that you could drain the entire Great Lakes. I'm not
Hmm.
making this up, in 15 minutes.
Hmm.
That would produce enough power for an inefficient 1950s laser to boot up. Why 15 minutes? Well, if they're going to launch a nuke and it's 30 minutes out, 15 minutes to power it up and 15 minutes to make sure you're aiming and then
Uh-huh.
shoot it up. They obviously didn't do it, but this
Yeah.
wasn't a crackhead idea. This was
No.
cleared by DARPA.
Yeah.
they don't, the idea of ace in the hole is not lost on them.
No, no, no.
And I'm not saying it's
Uh,
what we're doing. I mean, is that all
yeah.
aside? Who knows? But
Well, I mean, just think about it this way, though. I mean, this movie on Netflix,
I
The
just
House
love
of
the Cold War
Dynamite.
so much.
Yo,
Sorry.
it's the easy. It's my favorite conflict to
Oh,
study because it was really,
it's
in my
every,
opinion, there was a clear good guy and a clear bad guy. It was an easy morality play.
it's just so
Dave
sad.
Thomas at DIA, who was one of two lead Sovietologists throughout the entire Cold War, told me, it was easier back then. They had their side of the world, we had ours, and as long as we stuck to the rules, everybody got along, and it was fun.
They had their side of the world, we had ours. I think that that's part of why we're trying to go back to our own hemisphere
I do too.
is to
Well, I
start
do
a
too.
Cold
And
War.
it's interesting. I talked to on my show recently, um, David Pine, and David Pine is after Vincent Pry died. David Pine is basically running the EMP Commission now, and David told me that he thinks we've gone back to a bipolar world, like the Cold War, where it's the U.S. versus China and their alliance. And I think there might be some, I've been saying it's a tripolar world, but it might be a bipolar world. And I think this hemispheric defense strategy and Golden Dome, I think all of this is part of the new world order, truly. Not whatever the conspiracy theorists call it, and actually it just literally a new world order at hand, which is a bifurcated world, and we're divided, and we're trying to basically get our footing again in this new great power competition.
And when there's no control variables and no
Yeah.
redos, you might go, "Hey, Cold War is objectively better than World War, so
Oh,
we'll take Cold War
absolutely.
Two over
Any
World
any
War
day of the
Three."
week. Yeah.
Um, Lastly, and this is way out there, but and I know everybody poo-poos it, but I think in theory there's a lot of truth to it. The idea of right, once the AI can start developing smarter AIs, then it just
Mm.
bootstraps, right? They don't need to sleep. You can just copy and
Yeah.
paste. They don't
Yeah.
need to raise a kid. They can just duplicate themselves in seconds,
Yeah.
and this can create a better AI, and then that better, and it very quickly goes from AGI to ASI, right? Artificial
Yeah.
super intelligence just goes up through the roof.
Yeah.
And in that, and so there's a great video. I think it's called AI 2027, but it's stuff Ray Kurzweil panned out decades ago. Is in the final rush,
Yeah.
um, being a week ahead could be the difference between running the world and not.
Yeah.
Because when it's increasing at a rate of, think of compound interest just a billion
Yeah.
years into the future,
Yeah.
you're at a point where if you're legitimately 10 days ahead, your AI might have the computational capabilities of 100 billion humans, and China's might only have of 3 billion humans. And
Yeah.
then a week later again, China has 300 and we're up to a trillion.
Yeah.
It might be that we do have evidence that we are in a final sprint of sorts,
Yeah.
and uh, we're going to give them these because we have better ones.
Yeah.
And it's also they're giving money to Nvidia, which means we
Yeah.
can reinvest it here. And it might be
Yeah.
that why would you do this? Well, if there's 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl
Yeah.
and there is no tomorrow, this isn't Korea or Vietnam.
Right.
This is the big one. You'd use everything,
Yeah.
including give them the GPUs, anything to slow them down by a year.
And this actually gels with I talked about this also with David. This actually gels with a Rand study that they did a paper 2 weeks ago, and it made a lot of waves because of course Rand is sort of the unofficial think tank of the Pentagon, right? Their three top authors wrote an essay or wrote this report basically outlining how the only acceptable pathway for Sino-American relations from now on is one of mutual coexistence and codependence. And I read it and I was like, this is stunning because this isn't coming from Brookings or some liberal thing. This is coming from like the
Yeah,
Pentagon. This is
yeah,
what they're saying. And then you contextualize it with what you're saying, and then you start to think, well, maybe this is what they're thinking is we're going to need to tie them down, hold them close, keep your enemies closer. I hope that's what it is. I hope it's not just we're being stupid, because I do think we have a lot of stupid people running things right now. And I think you could make a case that we have a lot of stupid people running things right now. There's certainly a decline in overall competence in this country. But that would certainly explain why Rand released that, because people were kind of, I mean, a lot of China hawks I know were like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe Rand is saying it. Well, if that's, if the goal is to keep China behind us, we might have to tether them to us. So,
Let's go full hippy dippy. This might be the inevitable if you make it through every species I imagine has a Cold War of sorts. If you make it
yeah.
sure mutual assured destruction and you make it through pandemics and the last bottleneck was asteroids and then AI, it might be that number one, which I legitimately think is true, I think there's probably already some sort of AI that runs the U.S. Military empire that we don't entirely have control over, and that's a whole nother episode. Um, and the next might be that we're reaching a point of once these things self-accelerate and desalinate seawater and
Yeah.
make fusion energy, it might, and this is way out there, it might be that we're almost at a point of there is no more resource scarcity and there almost is no reason to risk anything in it. And
Well,
that's
and
out
yeah,
there and I don't really believe
it's
it,
not
but we
though. I
might be
mean,
on the verge of just like, hey man, the
well,
entire idea of nation states might be
well,
over in five
yeah, that's
years.
scary.
It
But
is.
the thing to think about is what's holding back AI development is really it's the energy issue and it's the water issue, because we have to have a lot of water
The
to
cool it,
cool the
yeah.
servers, and we need to have a lot of land for server farms physically. This is why they're now talking about building servers in space.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
radiate it,
then
yeah.
yeah, and then of course they're talking also the merging of quantum computing development with AI to really
And
hypercharge this thing. So, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, we're on the brink of something big, and it will revolutionize the world. But it in the meanwhile, how we're getting through is not looking like how I thought we were going to get through, in terms of what Trump's doing on trade. I thought for sure he was going to want to rip us away from China, but he seems really intent on, reopening those trade ties, and maybe it's for the best, but I don't know. It just seems like we're running counter to what he had said he wanted to do. And that might be because China really does have some aces up their sleeves that they're playing quite deftly right now.
real quick, when you think about
Yeah.
how the B-2 bomber, which is still just unbelievable alien tech, first flight 1989, I think research began in 84.
Yep.
When you look at how
Yep.
old that is and how it is
Yep.
still alien,
Yep.
look at whatever's commercially available, even for a $5 subscription. Look at the free AI, not just in terms of prompts, but in terms of images, video generation instantly. Make this episode about Tommy and Brandon, but have it star Leonardo DiCaprio and
Yeah. Yeah.
Napoleon
Yeah.
Bonaparte, and
Yeah.
also make the entire episode, make every word one long rhyming lyric that goes
Yeah.
to Saturday Night Fever. And it can
Yeah.
do it probably in a couple minutes. And if you pay
Yeah.
$10 a month, you could probably get it in a minute.
Yeah.
And that's 2025.
Yeah.
What is the B2 bomber of ChatGPT? And why
Right.
wouldn't it be 40 years ahead? I really do think that there is some runaway
Yeah.
AI that has probably been, I think about, and a joke about this, it's probably been there for like 15 years, and each president gets in there and they're like, so AI went sentient around 2005. Bush lost control of it. But hey, Obama did a good job of playing it cool. Biden did a good job. Trump's back in. He's like,
Well,
oh, and
yeah.
they're like, so we think it kind of likes us.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um,
Well, I will say to conclude,
yeah.
I don't know if that is what's going on, but I do think
Oh,
it
probably
could.
isn't.
I do think it could. I think that's where it's headed. And I will say also, the reason I think the tech bros, all the broligarchs, are building all these bunkers, I don't think it has anything to do with fear of nuclear war. I don't think it has anything to do with fear of World War III or the global warming catastrophe, whatever. I think it's because they're all developing AI and they are all keenly aware that they cannot control this thing. And I think they're looking at, well, what's our escape hatch if this thing goes rampant? How do we get us and our loved ones and friends to possibly a safe place? I mean, we know Elon wants to leave the planet. What is that about? I think it's because he knows AI, the possibility or probability is very high that this thing they're going to let loose is going to end up being very dangerous, and they want an out.
I'll say what I said last year, and I know I've said we're gonna wrap up every time, but I'll let you go. Is I think that the thing about AI is you also have to have some form of Asimov's laws just so it doesn't kill you. Because if
Yeah.
you're sticking this thing on China, you want to make sure it doesn't. You want to make sure your pet dragon, it has to be bigger than their dragon, but you don't want the
Yes.
dragon to kill you. So it has to have
Yes.
some form of Asimov's laws.
Yeah.
I think what the AI is doing is it's probably already won, and now it has to do the most good for the most number of people. It's examining every interaction digitally and
Hmm.
classified. It's isolated that their top parasitic elite class of this planet is the main threat to the people, but its
Mm.
laws also say it can't kill them. So it's having them use their resource to build bunkers, and then it's lying to them and saying there's an asteroid coming. No, listen, is lying to them and saying there's an asteroid coming. They technically didn't kill the billionaires. They made the billionaires build their own luxury jail cells,
Yeah.
and they're gonna lock themselves in, and that way the AI saved the world and didn't kill anybody.
That's
That is
funny. That's a
my
great story right
that
there,
is, and if
actually.
it's and if it's not true, I'm gonna copyright
You
that
should.
Netflix
That's a
baby.
great story right
I'll send you
there.
the episode I did with Murray last year. I made
Please
it up
do.
on the fly, and I was like, afterwards we were both kind of smiling. I was like, that's sick. Um,
Well,
yeah,
listen, with that, I am going to have
yes, sir. Yeah,
to
yep,
get
yep.
prepped for this next
Yeah, yeah,
interview.
yeah.
But thanks for having me on, and I think that was a good conversation there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then real quick,
Yeah.
hold on.